Okay, so yeah, talking to you again. This is an optimization problem, but from what we've seen today, rather a plain vanilla one. But at any rate, the point of this talk here is to demonstrate how it's great that we can do very efficient optimization. However, we need to keep in mind what we're actually trying to optimize for. And in this case, we're looking at an optimal fish passage barrier removal problem in Alaska, but where we have very deep ecological information to customize this problem for the target taxon of interest here, Pacific salmon. So Jesse O'Hanley, I'm not an optimization scientist in any way, shape, or form, so I want to acknowledge Jesse O'Hanley is our collaborator who sets up this problem and does the optimization for the linear integer programming problem. So if you have questions, I'm going to defer you to him. At any rate, so why am I talking about fish passage in Alaska? It's supposed to be wide open, this untapped wilderness. Well, that's true in most places, but not everywhere. Here's the study system. This is the Big Lake watershed in one of the most populated areas of Alaska. The census district is growing 50% per decade since 1950. It's one of the fastest growing census districts in the nation. And these are the roads, and all the dots are culverts. Culverts can impede fish passage. This can have a cumulative impact on fish stocks over a whole watershed. This also happens to be very productive salmon habitat. So managers are concerned that we're having cumulative negative impacts on population productivity. So our group, previously, before I came to Cornell, I was at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a biometrician, and we set off a portfolio of 5 years worth of ecological projects to understand very deeply how coho salmon, the target taxon to manage here, use this system and how they migrate through the network of streams and lakes and interact with culverts. Just a few details on the culvert mitigation problem. It's an interesting mathematical problem for several reasons. It's a network, so the decision points interact with each other. Here's an example. Let's say we have in-migrating fish coming into this network, and let's for the moment consider these to be 3 different culverts that are 100% barriers to fish movement. Well, if we make a management decision to spend money to mitigate 2 and 3, that doesn't get us anything because we still have culvert 1 here being a complete barrier. So we have to tell the model the network arrangement of the different decision points. We also need to prioritize what we're doing, so we have a budget constraint. In this study system alone, it would cost approximately $4 million to mitigate all of the culverts to 100% improve their fish passage. Here's one example. We took a double culvert, turned it into a bridge. That cost about $500,000, that one project alone. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the details of the ecology. You can see me afterwards. We're starting to have some papers come out on this, but basically we can describe in great detail at different life stages how these animals move throughout the network. They go from eggs, they emerge in main stem habitat, they move up into further in the watershed, so they are experiencing culverts there. They go into lakes to overwinter, they come back out, go to the ocean, and then rear as adults, and then they come back as the big silvery salmon to spawn. So they have many different points where they can interact with culverts. We can describe that within the optimization program by basically framing this as a life stage dependent dispersal model. So basically, long story short, is we have weightings that we apply to the objective function that describe the traffic, if you will, passing through the culverts at each life stage. Setting up the model, this is a mixed integer linear programming problem. Jesse O'Hanley did some really nifty setup of the problem to express all the interesting things here, that is the ecology that we came up with, the network structure, etc., all in the set of linear constraints down at the bottom here. And if you can set it up this way, then you can use off-the-shelf optimization programs like Cplex. That's I believe Jesse uses Cplex to solve this problem. And here's we just got these preliminary results last Friday. This is the optimal objective outcome from different culvert solutions given a different, each dot represents a different budget constraint. One thing to note about this is, which was kind of unique to Big Lake, was that this is a linear solution curve here. Basically, the marginal benefit of spending more money is constant across all the different solutions. Usually what you see is this declining marginal benefit, and so there's something different about Big Lake. We can also, very briefly, we can look at some of the attributes common to culverts that were included in all solutions, regardless of how much budget you have. If you had a minimum amount of budget, you would still take out these 4 yellow dots. And these are telling us that you should prioritize culverts that are in main stem habitat lower in the watershed. That's some of the common characteristics they have. And the last thing I would say is if you can customize these models, you can actually make, specific to the life history of the animal that you're trying to manage for, you can actually make inference about the ecology of the animal. For example, we can look at the different traffic loadings, if you will, on the culverts attributable to these different migration stages which we input into the model, and we can see which of those loadings are most important in driving the solution. And in this case, by far and away, it's the distribution from summer rearing habitat to overwinter lakes that drives the solution sets here. So I'll just leave it at that and say thank you.